I'm just tired of working so hard, being gracious at what I do, getting paid a fraction of the cost. I'm tired of hearing my sisters say the same thing over and over. You get tired. I hear people go, you work a lot. I'll have to.
There is a specific kind of breaking point that Hollywood does not like to acknowledge. Not the dramatic kind, not the meltdown on set or the leaked audio or the midnight tweet that a publicist scrambles to delete before sunrise. The quiet kind. The kind that builds for years underneath the surface of a smile that gets wider the more painful things become, until one day, in the middle of what was supposed to be a routine press interview, the smile cracks, and everything that was behind it comes spilling out in front of cameras that were only supposed to capture promotion. That is what happened to Taraji P. Henson.
I haven't seen a raise in my income since Proud Mary. And almost had to walk away from Color Purple. Yes, ma'am. Who said what? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Because you know what? If I don't take a stand, how am I making it easy for Fantasia and Danielle and Hallie and Felicia? Then why am I doing this?
And the industry's response to that moment, the speed of it, the coldness of it, the specific machinery that activated against her almost immediately, tells you more about how power actually operates in Hollywood than anything she said in the interview that started it. Taraji didn't set out to blow anything up. She was sitting in a SAG after-party interview, being asked the kinds of questions that actors answer on autopilot during press cycles, and somewhere in the middle of it, the truth came out. She said she hadn't seen a pay raise since Proud Mary in 2018. She said she almost walked away from Color Purple entirely because the number they offered her was that far below what her work and her name were worth. She said she took the role anyway.
Andre, as Blitz, our director, says, I mean, I have been watching her from the beginning. And to just have someone just be a guide for us, be our voice box. I remember when we first came in and we were doing rehearsal and they put us all in the same space. Like we didn't have our own dressing rooms at the time and they did not give us, sorry, Miss O, we didn't have no food.
Not because the money was right, but because she understood that the choices she made set a precedent for the women coming up behind her. For Fantasia, for Danielle, for every black actress watching from the next tier who needed someone to hold the line even when holding it cost something. That wasn't trash talk. That was testimony. But Hollywood doesn't always distinguish between the two. And the people with the most to lose from that testimony, the producers, the executives, the names attached to the movie whose reputations were now sitting uncomfortably inside Taraji's honest account of what it cost her to make it, started making calls almost immediately. 50 Cent had already been watching. He'd been watching for a while. Because before the Color Purple press cycle ever started, before Taraji's interview landed the way it landed, 50 had been vocal about the dynamics at play.
What they're getting paid, which is half of what a man is getting paid, well, we get probably 1/10 of what a Caucasian woman gets. And I'm number one on the call sheet. And then I have to go in and I have to hustle for my worth, me to you. Because once again, I got the Oscar, I got the Emmy, I got the 2 Tonys. I've done Broadway, I've done off-Broadway, I've done TV, I've done film, I've done all of it. I have a career that's probably comparable to Meryl Streep, Julianne Moore, Sigourney Weaver. They all came out of Yale. They came out of Juilliard. They came out of NYU. They had the same path as me, and yet I am nowhere near them. Not as far as money, not as far as job opportunities, nowhere close to it. And yet, I have to constantly get on that phone, and I have fabulous agents, by the way. They are getting it. But I have to get on that phone, and people say, you're a black Meryl Streep. You are, and we love you. We love you. There is no one like you. Okay, then if there's no one like me, you think I'm that? You pay me what I'm worth. You give me what I'm worth.
He posted his support early, and he made it specific. Not a vague solidarity post, not a performative gesture designed to generate engagement without commitment. He came with an offer. He told Taraji directly, publicly, that G-Unit Film was ready to work with her and ready to pay her what she actually deserved. Green light, no games, come through. That post landed like a signal. Because 50 Cent attaching himself to this situation, with the history he has, with the specific beef he has carried for years with the people now circling Taraji, meant this wasn't going to be a story that got quietly managed. It meant someone with platform, receipts, and absolutely zero interest in protecting Oprah Winfrey's feelings had entered the conversation.
Black actress and producer in Hollywood. Of course, I'm going to have to work until it's the end.
And the second he stepped in, the stakes changed. To understand why that matters, you have to understand what 50 actually represents in this specific dynamic. Because this isn't just celebrity beef. This is someone who has been sounding the alarm about exactly this kind of power play for years. Who watched what happened to Monique and said the quiet part loud, while everyone else was nodding in private and staying silent in public. And now he's watching it happen again. Same blueprint, same players, different target, and he is not staying silent this time either. The color purple was supposed to be a triumph. The cast alone was a statement. Fantasia, Taraji, Halle Bailey, Danielle Brooks, a collection of black women at various stages of legendary that should have generated the kind of cultural momentum that carries a film from opening weekend through awards season without breaking a sweat. The marketing was heavy. The goodwill was real. This was not a movie that needed to fail, but the conditions behind the scenes were telling a different story than the promotional material.
We got labeled as difficult because I said one word, and that was no. Now, I said no to some very powerful people. I said no to Oprah Winfrey. I said no to Tyler Perry. I said no to Lee Daniels, and I said no to Lionsgate. And the difficulty came in when people that look like me, like Oprah, Tyler, Lee Daniels, and I gotta put my brother Steve on the list. Y'all knew I was not wrong. Each one of you said to me, Monique, you're not wrong. And when I heard you go on the air and you said, my sister done burnt too many bridges, and there's nothing I can do for her name.
Fantasia and Danielle Brooks revealed in a sit-down that the cast didn't even have individual dressing rooms during production. They were grouped together in a shared space. There was no food provided on set. The basic dignities that productions routinely extend to actors of significantly lesser profile were simply absent. And the women on this set, whose names and faces were being used to sell the movie to the world, were expected to absorb that without comment. And for a while they did, because that is what the industry conditions you to do. You accept the deal, you show up, you give everything you have to the work, and you trust that the people above you in the power structure will take care of the things that are supposed to be taken care of. You smile in the press junket photos. You say wonderful things about the director and the material and the experience of working with your castmates. You play the game. Taraji played it for a long time. Long enough that when she finally stopped playing it, when the weight of what she had absorbed finally exceeded what she was able to hold, it came out with the kind of raw, unguarded honesty that you cannot manufacture and cannot walk back once it's in the world. The breakdown with Gayle King was the moment the story became impossible to contain. Taraji sat in that interview and she said she was tired. Not the tired of a long press cycle or a difficult shoot. The bone-deep, years-long tired of a woman who has given everything she has to an industry that has responded by consistently paying her a fraction of what her male counterparts take home, a fraction of what white actresses with comparable careers command, and still had the audacity to treat her like she should be grateful for the opportunity. She said she was thinking about leaving, and the way she said it, not as a threat, not as a negotiating tactic, but as the genuine confession of someone who has genuinely run out of reasons to stay, hit people somewhere real, because Taraji P. Henson is not an actress on the margins of this industry. She is empire. She is hidden figures. She is one of the most recognizable and celebrated black women in the history of American television and film. And if the system has ground her down to the point where leaving feels like relief rather than loss, what does that say about what it does to the women who don't have her profile, her awards, her decades of receipts? Gayle King's interview did not help. Fans noticed it immediately. The way the questions were shaped, the moments where a sharper interviewer would have pressed harder, and Gayle chose to soften instead. The read was that Gayle, whose friendship with Oprah is as documented as anything in entertainment media, was running interference. Not visibly. Not in a way that could be directly quoted or clipped, but in the texture of the conversation, in the questions that didn't get asked, in the way the interview kept steering back toward resolution when the story had not yet been fully told. What was fully told, and what the audience understood even when the words stayed careful, was that Oprah was at the center of this. Not as a villain in some simple cartoonish sense, but as a producer, as a person with institutional power over the conditions on that set, over the budget that determined what Taraji was offered, over the decisions about dressing rooms and food and the basic dignity of the women whose talent and name recognition she was relying on to make her movie work. And now, according to reports that started surfacing, Almost immediately after Taraji's interviews became the story, Oprah was furious. Not about the conditions, about the talking. This is where 50 Cent's warning stopped being background noise and became the loudest voice in the room. The pattern Oprah has run before is not a secret. Monique went through it first, and she went through it publicly enough and painfully enough that nobody in this industry can claim they didn't see what the playbook looked like. In 2009, Monique delivered one of the most celebrated performances of that entire decade in Precious, a film Oprah produced. She was paid $50,000. Before taxes, before deductions. $50,000 for an Oscar-winning performance in a major motion picture produced by one of the wealthiest women in the world. She took the deal because the role was real, and the opportunity was real, and sometimes you make that calculation when you're trying to build something that lasts. But when Oprah asked her to do a second press tour, unpaid, Monique said no. And that single word, that completely reasonable, professionally appropriate refusal to work for free, was the beginning of the end of her mainstream career. Within what felt like days, the narrative shifted. Monique went from acclaimed to difficult, from celebrated to blacklisted. The people who had been telling her privately that she was absolutely right, Steve Harvey among them, as she called out directly and specifically on his own show, said nothing publicly. Because saying something publicly meant standing against the infrastructure that Oprah represented. And that infrastructure in the entertainment industry touches enough doors that most people decide the cost of standing against it is simply too high. 50 Cent was not one of those people. He stood with Monique when standing with her cost something. He showed up to her stand-up show and posted about it publicly during a period when her name had been systematically scrubbed from the conversations she should have been central to. He said, "Make it happen." He said she had him in a trance. He used his platform to put oxygen back into a career that the machine had been quietly suffocating. And now he is doing the same thing for Taraji, but earlier, louder, and with the specific energy of someone who has watched this movie before and is not interested in waiting for the third act to say something. His warning to Oprah was not subtle. Word coming out of his camp is that he has dirt, specific, damaging, the kind of information that doesn't just generate a bad news cycle, but reshapes how the public understands the person it's about. He told her to back off Taraji. He made it clear that he was watching. And the implicit message underneath all of it was one that anyone who knows 50 Cent's history of following through on exactly these kinds of warnings understands without it needing to be spelled out. He is not bluffing. The Color Purple's box office numbers made everything worse. The film grossed approximately $58 million against a production budget of roughly $100 million. And that gross number is misleading, because theaters take approximately half of ticket revenue, which means the studio's actual return was closer to $24 million on a $100 million investment. The losses, when marketing costs are factored in, are estimated at $75 million or more. It is a financial disaster by any reasonable measure of what that word means in studio accounting. Oprah had a great deal riding on this beyond the film itself. Her production company, Harpo Film Studios, had already absorbed losses on its two previous productions. Color Purple was supposed to be the project that established Harpo as a serious player in theatrical film, the statement that justified the company's existence at that level and opened doors for everything that came after. Instead, it became the most visible and expensive failure the company had yet produced. And in that context, the producers needed someone to blame. The decision about who that would be did not take long. Industry sources reported that executives circulated a narrative internally almost immediately after the numbers came in, that Taraji's interviews had poisoned the promotional well, that her honesty about pay and conditions had given audiences a reason to engage with the story of the movie's dysfunction rather than the movie itself, that the box office failure was a direct consequence of her speaking. An executive framing, according to a source, described her as using the press tour as a selfish opportunity to change her personal narrative as an aging and underpaid actress. Read that framing again slowly. An aging and underpaid actress. Applied to Taraji P. Henson, a woman who had just finished filming a major studio production and was actively promoting it during an awards season press cycle. The contempt embedded in that description, the specific choice to frame her honest account of her own working conditions as personal brand management rather than legitimate grievance, tells you everything about how the people writing that narrative see the women they hire. And Taraji, who could read the writing on the wall as clearly as anyone, tried to course correct. She posted a tribute to Oprah on Instagram that was effusive enough to make people uncomfortable on her behalf, describing Oprah as a steady and solid beacon of light, thanking her for being heard with the energy of someone who understands that the alternative to this specific kind of public deference is the alternative Monique got. It didn't work. Or if it worked at all, it didn't work enough, because reports kept coming that Taraji was losing projects. Not just new opportunities that hadn't materialized, actual jobs, roles, and gigs that had already been confirmed that were now being quietly pulled back as the blackball infrastructure activated around her name. She had breakdowns, multiple of them, according to sources close to the situation. Not the kind that get filmed and go viral. The private kind, the ones that happen when you have been fighting something enormous for a long time and you finally have to reckon with the possibility that the fight is not going your way. She reached out to people. She tried to find allies who had enough standing to push back against what was being done to her. She found that the people who agreed with her in private were, almost without exception, unwilling to say so in public. Almost without exception. Because 50 Cent was already talking. He had been talking since the beginning. And the specific threat he made, the dirt on Oprah, the warning to back off, the public declaration that he was paying attention, created a situation that Oprah's camp had not fully anticipated. Because Oprah is accustomed to operating in an environment where the people who know things about her have calculated that silence is cheaper than speaking. 50 Cent has never made that calculation in his life. His entire career has been built on the opposite principle, that saying the thing everyone else is too scared to say is exactly where the power is. The question now is whether his intervention is enough to change the outcome for Taraji. Because the pattern, when it ran against Monique, was thorough enough and sustained enough that even 50's support couldn't fully reverse what had been done to her career. The industry is large, and Oprah's reach inside it is deep, and the people who enforce these kinds of informal blacklists don't need to coordinate explicitly. They just need to share an understanding of who is currently inconvenient, and the calls stop coming on their own. But Taraji is not Monique. Her profile is different, her fan base is different, and the cultural moment she is operating inside of is different. The conversation about how black women are treated in Hollywood, the pay gap, the conditions, the systematic undervaluation of their talent and labor is not a niche conversation anymore. It has been amplified by enough voices at enough levels of the industry that the people running the blackball infrastructure have to weigh the cost of being seen doing what they are doing in a way they did not have to weigh it 15 years ago when Monique was being erased. And 50 Cent standing at the edge of this with whatever he has and the absolute willingness to use it is the variable that nobody in Oprah's camp has a clean answer for. He came through for Monique when nobody else would. He came through for Taraji before the situation fully developed, when most people were still deciding whether to take sides. And the warning he sent, back off or the dirt comes out, is the kind of warning that lands differently when it comes from someone with a documented history of following through. The industry is watching. The fans are watching. And Taraji P. Henson, who gave everything she had to a movie that gave her very little back, and who had the courage to say so out loud when saying so came with consequences, she deserves better than the silence of people who agree with her in private and won't say it anywhere it counts. 50 Cent said it, out loud, where it counts. And if Oprah is smart, if she has been paying attention to what happens when 50 Cent decides someone has crossed a line he is personally invested in, she will take that warning seriously. Because the alternative is a conversation that her team does not control about information she did not choose to make public, dropping at a moment not of her choosing. That is not a position that someone who has spent decades carefully managing her image wants to find herself in. And the fact that she has been put there by a situation she could have avoided by simply paying black women what their work was worth is the part of this story that should outlast all the drama and all the gossip and all the industry maneuvering that surrounds it. Pay people what they're worth. Treat them with dignity on the set you're asking them to give their craft to. And when they tell you what it cost them to show up for you, listen instead of reaching for the phone to make their career disappear. That's not a radical position. But in Hollywood, apparently, it is a revolutionary one. Viola Davis said it years ago with a clarity that should have ended the conversation permanently. She described having a career comparable to Meryl Streep, the awards, the training, the range, the decades of work across every medium, and still having to get on the phone and fight for compensation that her white counterparts never had to fight for. She said she was being paid a fraction of what a Caucasian woman in her position commanded. Not a gap, a fraction. And she said it while sitting at the absolute top of what any actress could achieve in this industry, which means the problem is not about not being good enough or not being established enough or not having done the work. The problem is structural. It is deliberate, and it is applied consistently to black women regardless of what they achieve. That context is what Taraji was sitting inside when she spoke. She was not complaining about one bad deal in isolation. She was describing a pattern that Viola named, that Keke Palmer named, that Gabrielle Union named, that Monique named, that runs so consistently across so many careers at so many levels of this industry that calling it coincidence stopped being an option a long time ago. She was the latest person to say what too many people already knew. And the response from the people who benefit from that pattern staying quiet was exactly what the pattern predicts. Make the speaker the problem. shift the conversation from the conditions to the complaining. Frame the woman who told the truth as the one who caused the damage, rather than the people who created the conditions that made the truth necessary. It is a move so practiced and so reflexive that it executes almost automatically. No meeting required, no coordination memo, just the shared institutional instinct of people who understand that the story of the mistreatment is more dangerous than the mistreatment itself. What Taraji disrupted by speaking, however unintentionally, was that automatic execution, because she spoke during a press cycle for a high-profile film with a high-profile cast that was already generating attention, which meant the story she told had a platform that most of these conversations don't get. It wasn't buried in an industry trade or a late-night podcast. It was front and center, attached to a movie that was being discussed everywhere, and it gave every person who had been carrying a version of the same story a visible place to attach it. That is why the response was so fast and so severe. Not because Taraji said something uniquely damaging, but because the timing gave her words a reach that the people who needed them contained could not fully manage. The movie became secondary. The conversation became primary. And the conversation, once it reached that size, started pulling in names and histories and documented patterns of behavior that the industry would have strongly preferred to keep separate and quiet. Monique's story came back into focus. Viola's words got replayed. Fantasia and Danielle's revelations about the set conditions added texture. The whole architecture of how Black women are treated in these productions, the pay, the facilities, the basic respect, was suddenly visible in a way it usually isn't, assembled in one place, impossible to dismiss as isolated incidents. And Oprah, who has spent decades cultivating an image as a champion of Black women and a beacon of empowerment, found herself at the center of a story about a Black woman being paid below her worth on a production she oversaw. That image, the specific gap between the public Oprah and the producing Oprah, is what makes 50 Cent's threat so potent, because whatever dirt he has, it doesn't have to be dramatic to be damaging. It just has to deepen the contradiction that already exists. It just has to give the public more evidence that the gap between the image and the reality is wider than the carefully managed narrative has allowed people to see. That is the specific vulnerability 50 is pointing at. And Oprah, who understands image management as well as anyone alive, knows exactly how exposed she is right now. So here is what this comes down to. Taraji P. Henson told the truth about what her labor was worth and what she was paid for it. The industry responded by trying to make her disappear for saying so. And 50 Cent, who has been the loudest voice in the room on exactly this kind of situation for years, stepped in early and stepped in hard with a warning that Oprah's camp cannot afford to dismiss. Do you think 50's intervention is enough to actually protect Taraji this time? Or does Oprah's reach go deep enough to absorb even this? And what does it say about Hollywood that the person most willing to stand up for Black women being underpaid and mistreated is a man who has nothing institutional to gain from doing it? Drop your honest take in the comments, because this conversation is far from over and the people at the center of it are still moving. And if this is the kind of breakdown that keeps you here, hit that like and subscribe. We are going to be watching this one very closely.